the first thing I thought when I was listening to this record was, how did they capture and distill a lot of what's going on in my head? Like, either they're watching me, they are, observing me, or they know me so well. This was one of the very first records where I felt seen, and it was both rewarding and, validating, but also a little bit vulnerable. And I'm just like, should I get my lawyers on the call? Because how were they in my head like this? Anyway, let's dive into this one. Southern Progress by Flummox. So Flummox is what's the best, I guess, Wikipedia has them as experimental rock. I would say, yeah, definitely very experimental rock, art rock. I would even go so far as to say very metal induced. There's some of the extreme core elements that are found on here, very aggressive metal, progressive in a lot of different ways, for sure. So if you're like me and you like that more experimental, very avant-garde, pushing of boundaries, throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks, then you are going to really, really love this record. If you do not, if anything that I just said sounds like, I'm not quite sure, this album is definitely not for you. Because, this is a experience. There's a lot going on this record. And I could see a lot of people being very frustrated with the amount of change-ups that are happening, how they're basically throwing away any kind of song structure or, standardization within the sets here. And they're just like really driving home just some outrageous, intense singing styles and songwritingship. So for me, I immediately perked my ears up and I'm just like, ooh, what do we have here? And then we got into the lyrical content and I'm like, oh, they're hitting really close to my home. I know, right? It's almost like, being shown a mirror and being like, God, no, can't look at it right now, God, right? Because that's kind of what there's going on here. I want to talk about first what I absolutely love about this record, and then we'll get into some of the things that I struggle with within this record. The first thing, obviously, as I already mentioned, the experimentation, the everything goes kind of attitude about this record. We are going from genre style to genre style to genre style without any real rhyme or reason or even care. And unlike where other artists and bands, I feel, that try this and it just feels like a pile of slop, or things just didn't kind of work out, or it's like too much art, not enough matter. In that sense, this at least pulls together very, very well. And I think there's a root sound that is very Flummox. It's kind of that cross beam between like a Devin Townsend, between the Buried and Me, even a little bit of like Captain Beefheart, like very avant-garde, very challenging, very, very dense styles of music, with that very expressive, very introspective, very, vulnerability, right, cutting to the bone aspect that we would find from more independent artists and more singer-songwriter artists, So we're kind of at that crossbeam. It's almost as if, and I know Devin Townsend does this as well, but it's just like so astute. And a lot of this needs to be applauded and credited to the lead singer, lead bass player, and piano player of Alison Blake Dillinger. Her presentation on here is just banging, like you can tell she has a very crystal clear focus and crystal clear vision for where this album wants to go. And it's almost like she's just along for the ride at this point, It's like, okay, well, the train is on its tracks and it's not going in a straight direction at all. Let's just hope we get to the proper destination. And yeah, I'm just along for the ride. Even within this chaos and even within this mind-melting, we have no idea where they're going soundscapes, there are still moments on here that I still love when it becomes very structured. It's almost like that guiding light that allows everything to swirl around. Like the third track of Always Something Going Down and the seventh track of Siren Shock, both of these are definitely more of a rock like track rather than the other tracks on here that are very avant-garde metal, you know, and it's a lot more established. Like, these are songs that I could play out in the wild and not get people to turn their heads and being like, what on earth are they playing? I really enjoy the mastery of this, of playing some really fun, really groovy, really like tangential and concrete tracks that are kind of like these islands out in this world of chaos. And like the tracks that are found between these, the second and fourth track, Southern Progress, the title track, and Fernetto's theme, as well as Long Park and Executive Dysfunction, these 4 tracks are just balls to the wall insane in the best possible way, you know, and I love how aggressive, how insane, and how balls to the wall crazy these tracks can be without it going over the top to an extreme amount, and always kind of having a tether on the grounding, especially on tracks like Nesting Doll, the 5th track, and Locust Eater, the 9th track. These are very atmospheric and very somber tracks. You know, it's a lot more introspective. It's almost like, okay, we've had our fun clowning around. Let's actually bring this back to more of a humanistic touch, you know? It's like we've dealt with some pretty heavy concepts. We've dealt with some really deep issues here. Let's bring it back to the center and just have a quick moment to ourselves. And this leads me to the 3 tracks that I haven't talked about. What We're Waiting For, Flummendale, I believe is how you pronounce it, the 10th track, and Coyote Gospel, the last track. It kind of showcases what I absolutely love about this album, where there are, even through all this chaos, there are these touchstone moments of pure brilliance, you know, and that's what brings all this chaos together. It's one thing to just throw everything on the wall, you know, and experiment and try all these things, but you need to have something that works. You need to have a root. You need to have something that brings the whole track together. What We're Waiting For has these really brilliant crescendo moments on it. Flummendale has these really heartfelt and really bombastic moments on it that brings this all together. And the final track of Coyote Gospel has this like meat about it that doesn't let you go and just kind of holds on, and it's like, okay, let's just hope for the best. So yeah, this actually brings me to the one drawback that I have to this album, and one of the main reasons why I don't return to this as much as I really hoped I would when I first listened to this. This album is 56 minutes long, and I think it's about 10 minutes too long. You know, this album does feel its length. There are albums that I have listened to that are into the 80 minutes that I feel are shorter than this album. It feels long. You know, there's a lot going on this record, and it feels its runtime. And I just wish that this album was a little bit more condensed, but also I wish that maybe 3 or 4 of these tracks were condensed into, say, 1 track. And similarly, I wish that some of these tracks were maybe brought out a little bit more so that it wasn't just chaos all the time. You know, there was a little bit more of a play out, a little bit more of build-ups, just to get our excitement going for when we get to some of those bigger, meaty moments. It has a little bit more of a play out, you know? Something that, say, like a Devin Townsend, a Haken, or even like something like Native Construct did way back in the day. I wish that there was a little bit more build-ups, a little bit more payoffs, in the end, a little bit more progressive rock. You know, I feel like, yeah, any album can benefit from having just a little bit more progressive rock in it. But in the end, the real gold star of this record, the real crowning jewel, is just how queer it is and how unabashedly, like, genderqueer it is, you know? And for somebody like me that is, like, I love seeing myself in this kind of music. Sure, at times it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but like I desperately need that, you know? Like I'm raging at the sky, just begging for more music like this. And so when it hits, and it hits this hard, I absolutely adore it, you know, and it's so validating, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going through this just by myself. You know, there are other people out there that have experienced this same kind of thoughts, you know, so it's quite validating, a little uncomfortable, but ultimately, you know, that's the human experience. So yeah, in the end, I think my final rating for this record will be Southern Progress by Flummox is an album that I would absolutely pick up in physical format. Like, in so many ways, this album was made for me. Like, I almost feel like this album was specifically targeted towards me. And the fact that I wasn't listed in the album credits is, I'm like, come on, guys. But, you know, I'm just a little guy here on the internet, and I'm sure they haven't even heard of me. So, yeah, that's just what we have for the human experience. You know, it's got so many different colors, so many different flavors, and I'm so pleased that an album like this exists, because in the grander landscape of things, it gets a little stagnant. You know, you need some of this experimentation. You need some of this queer music to shake things up and be like, hey, there's more than just the vanilla flavor out there in the ice cream truck. We've got a whole rainbow of flavors that you guys got to check out, and we can finally see it in some of this music. So love that, and I love this flavor. So yeah, that's what I've got for Southern Progress. What do you guys think about this album? It's been out for a while. You know, this came out in April, and I know I'm a little tardy to the party on this one, but we've had a lot of great music, and I'm slowly starting to catch up on some of these album reviews. So yeah, I want to know what you guys thought about this record. Did you love it? Did you hate it? I do implore you to listen to this one. This is one of those records where, even though it's challenging, even though it might be frustrating for some people, and even though it might go against the grain, I still highly recommend checking this one out, just to broaden horizons. So I want to thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.